Welcome to this lecture for the Blended Erasmus program, the BIP. I'm Roberto Prosseda, and I'm the director of a master and PhD program at the piano department of Rovigo State Conservatory in Italy. The title of this little lecture is From Practice to Performance. So I would like to focus on what it is practicing for a professional pianist or for an aspiring professional pianist, and why practicing is so important to build up for each young pianist a better awareness and a better understanding of what we do with music. The basic concept which is behind every other idea which I'm going to share is that we cannot talk about technique, we cannot talk about practicing if we don't know what is the core of music. So we practice something, we do something for achieving a result, and the result is always a musical result. So I would like to start focusing on what is music for me. Music is not just a question of combining sounds, combining harmonies, understanding structures, and of course, finding the right means, the right ways with our hands, with our brain to realize a good performance. Music is something deeper and which is standing behind this. Music is a thought which is connecting spirit, moods, in, of course, a logical and very clear structure. And if we are not aware of all of this, everything else would be not so useful. So to start, I would like to focus about the meaning of the word practice. And since I'm Italian, I like to say it in Italian. Studio, studiare. Studiare is coming from Latin word studium. Studium has several meanings, but no meaning is connected to the modern, normal concept of practicing meant as a normal repeating action of, playing over and over again the same passages until when we don't really know it well. So I'm not going to say this. I think that practicing is never repeating without listening, is never repeating without thinking, just getting an automatic habit enabling us to play better. Of course, this is a possibility which could work sometime, but there is much more about practicing. And let's look what is studium meaning from Latin word studium. I would like to start with the first meaning, which I really like, which is about passion. So uh, in Latin, studium also means passion in the sense of taking care with our heart, not only with our brain, and doing something with a caring approach. So, of course, applying this to our musical practice, studium means that we have to practice also taking care of every detail, both on the score and, of course, on the way of our playing. And cares also refers about our body. So, listening to our muscles, to our breath, to our rhythm, and never forcing our body to do something which is not natural for our body. And that's why the most important thing that we have to do when we practice, other than focusing on the musical idea, is listening. Listening not only to the sound result of our performance and comparing our result with our musical intention, which are behind, but also listening to our body, to be aware of our muscles or of which part of the body, of the arm, or the fingers are we using? Do we really need to do that movement? And uh, everything together. So listening to the sound, listening to the body will be part of our practicing method. But there is another meaning of the word studium, which is also important for us to focus what it means practicing for a pianist. Studium also means desire, desiring something, aspiring to reach a certain goal. Of course, this is clear when we practice. Our goal, our result that we want to achieve after our practicing session should be quite clear before, already when we start. Okay, today I will practice 2 hours focusing on the first movement of that sonata, and I am aware about my stage at this moment, and I want to reach a better stage. I want to understand better the structure. I want to find a narrative. I want to solve some technical problems. But having these goals very clear and having the feeling that we really want to achieve that goal is so important, because if we practice without desire, just as a normal routine action, that's not going to work. On the other side, we have to enjoy our practicing. The more we enjoy every moment of the practicing, the better results we will achieve. And again, there is another third meaning of the studium word in Latin, which is also interesting for us. Studium also means a natural inclination towards a specific activity. So, how can we use this definition for our goals? Well, also in musical practicing, we have to feel what is our natural inclination. Why do we like that piece? Why do we like to play in that way? And the more we feel aligned with what we feel, with what we naturally do in that particular piece, the better result we will achieve. Now let's switch to Italian from Latin, because also in Italy we have the word studio, coming from studium, of course. And in Italian, studio has different meanings than Latin word studium. So in Italian, studio mostly means has two different meanings. One meaning, which is also very useful for our practicing method, is application to some activity, in this case to playing the piano, aimed at learning what has been experienced by others in the same branch of knowledge, in order to make those experiences made by other people one's own and possibly go beyond them, proposing new solutions and new ideas in the theoretical or practical field. Uh, that's very interesting, because normally, if you ask a student what is practicing for you, they will tell you practicing is achieving a goal, which is a model already existing, given by other recordings or other colleagues who are playing that piece very well for us. We want to play like them. Now, when we practice, of course, trying to imitate other interpretation, other pianists in our case, is always a good tool to be aware how it works. But this practicing should always be aimed to do something more, to find a different, a more advanced approach and more individual approach, which cannot be exactly what other people already achieved. So keep in mind, studium means getting more awareness of how we could achieve something, also analyzing what has been done by other people, but the main goal is to find our own way of practicing and our own way of uh, interpreting that particular piece. Another last meaning of studio in Italian also is a special meaning for visual arts, and it means studio as a drawing made as a research into techniques and compositional forms, or as preparation for definitive works. Of course, when you talk about sculptures or paintings, you can find several, drafts, several works of preparation. They are called bozzetti, but also studi. Now, it's true that also when we prepare our own interpretation of a Beethoven sonata or a Chopin ballade or whatever, we are practicing creating kind of drafts. So we are not sure yet how we will play finally our complete idea of that piece. The idea takes shape thanks to our drafts, our experiments. So let's think that studium practicing is not just achieving a goal which we already know exactly. It's good to have a very clear objective, a very clear goal, but it's also good to think that practicing also consists in making experiments and creating little drafts, maybe different drafts of the same piece, different versions of the same passage, how we can play the same passage in 4, 5, 6 different ways. Then we are able to choose the one we prefer, but we are choosing among a wider alternative selection. Now, let's move to a second chapter of this little lecture about practicing from practicing to performance, which are the goals of our study, of our practicing. Of course, the goals are reaching the clear project, the final detailed projects of our interpretation. So the the what we want to have, what we want to play, the object should be very, very clear in our mind. Most of the times, if you open a book about piano playing, how to play the piano, they usually focus on how to do, how to play scales, how to play octaves, how to play double thirds, how to play legato. But usually they do not connect this how to techniques to the object. On the other side, I think that when we practice, it's always very interesting to keep in mind the object. So, what is exactly the mood, for example? What is the story, if any? What are the different emotions which are connected through a narrative? So, what is our interpretative project that we want to realize by practicing? The most clear is our idea of which moods are getting in each part of the piece, how they are connected, and which is the drama of the piece. The more it's clear this, the easier it will be to find the way how to obtain that result. If you look at conductors, they usually apply this method. Of course, conductors don't have an orchestra with them all the time. So before meeting the orchestra for the first rehearsal, they already spent many hours on the score trying to focus on their own idea, their own phrasing, the idea of bowings, of dynamics, of colors, of voicing, of priorities among different teams. So they build up their own interpretation before conducting the orchestra. And this is what I mean when I say having cleared the object before the technique. Of course, when the conductor goes to meet the orchestra, of course, they speak also about how to obtain the sound that they want. Maybe they will give some suggestions about articulation, about dynamics, but because they have in mind the musical idea. We, as a pianist, we are lucky because our piano is always with us. We don't have to pay other players in order to practice. But this is also going to be a problem when we have this piano available and we just play the piano, we play the keyboard without thinking what we want to obtain. Most of my students, at least when I meet for the first time, are used to practice just playing. And when they read a new piece, they simply open the score and sight read without having a clear idea what they're going to do. They just see what happens when they play something. They have wrong notes, they check, they correct, but they learn something without already being aware of the meaning of that one that they are doing. They don't give a meaning. They get the meaning, let's say, on the way, which is not wrong, but I really think that the conductor's approach of creating your own idea, the shape of the phrase, the voicing, the dynamic shapes, before starting the rehearsal with the orchestra is a much better approach. So basically, after that, of course, we also have to focus on the how to, because when we have our idea very clear, of course, the idea is getting uh, an evolution, because the more we play the piece, the more the piece speaks to us, and we find new ideas, new possibilities, and we can experiment them in the practicing time. But the more the idea is clear, the more we need to find the way, of course, to obtain the musical result through our instrument, through the piano. And now, so we pass to the third chapter of this short lecture, which is about the study environment. So I am now in my practicing studio. It's not a big room, but it's very silent. Um, there is a good lighting, and also I have some objects, my books, of course. It's quite white, it's not so dark. Now it's night, so usually we have the window with the sun coming out. And there are also many colors in my books. So I like this because it's a good balance of uh, clarity. It's not too confused as an environment, but it's also active. It's not too square. There is some kind of chaos in my library, which makes me a little bit more stimulated in imagining different ideas. So let's not just practice in any place. Let's try to customize our practicing room in order to feel at home and to enjoy also what we see around us. And of course, a very important theme about the study environment is about the digital detox. Today, we have a problem. We have a problem, which is our um, digital life, checking emails and WhatsApp and messages and Viber and Messenger and Facebook and Instagram. And it's hard to be able to focus on only one object, in this case, our musical practicing, when we are having all these alert messages around and we want to check if somebody commented on our post and we want to check if there is any new email. So my suggestion is that when we practice, we do exactly what the conductor does with orchestra. We switch off our phone, we switch off our computer, we don't check emails, we take maybe only 1 hour, half an hour, whatever, but that is a rehearsal time with no disturbing inputs which could interfere with our music making. I know this is very hard, but I tell you, it's the best way to obtain the best results in limited time. And I have 3 children and a family, so I know how it is important to use our time in the best way. And of course, about the environment of our practicing, it's also very important to focus on our position, our bench. For example, I know many people who have a wonderful pianos like Steinway, Fazioli, but they don't have a real good bench. In many schools, we find Steinway pianos and benches which are not really stable. I think the bench for a pianist is a very important thing. So take care of it. Spend €300 to have a really good bench, which you feel stable and comfortable sitting on. And of course, the piano. This is obvious, should be not necessarily a Steinway or a very expensive piano, but should be very well regulated and in tune, because the sound result that we get is very important. It should be rewarding. We should enjoy every detail of our practicing. If we don't enjoy because the piano is out of tune, the action is not even, the lighting is not good, the bench is not clear, everything should be absolutely, in harmony in order to get our results. And of course, our posture. As I said before, let's listen not only to the sounds, but also to our body. As of course, the posture should not be like this, but also the movements should never be exaggerating, always following the musical flow, trying to economize to avoid any unnecessary movement. I'm not going into technique because, of course, this is not about, but of course, technique for me, just a little think about that, is not a law. It's not a question of we belong to that particular school, so we decide that the finger should be moved only in this way. I'm not a Taliban in this sense. I think that there are many possibilities, many techniques, and pianists are like painters. Painters can choose different brushes, bigger, shorter, longer, wider, thinner, harder, softer. So our fingers are like brain, are like paintings, so we can really decide which kind of touch we want, and we choose the different angle of part of the finger which is touching the key, and of course the flexibility of the arm, flexibility of the wrist, and moving the elbow or not, everything which is part of our mechanical playing, a mechanical, let's say, side of our playing, should be focused, should be aware. Let's not just play in the same way that we are used to. Let's be aware of how many different ways we can have to obtain the same result, but with different colors or with different body feelings. And so this is just a little kind of introduction. So what is the life of musician for me, and what practicing means? And there are many other, of course, thoughts which I would like to share with you. Few minutes left for this half an hour lecture. Let just tell me something about the career. Of course, we practice, we dedicate to our instruments, the piano, a lot of time. I think that a professional musician starts practicing since he's like 5 year old, 6 year old, and maybe in his daily life, every day, average of 4 or 5 hours are dedicated to music, to practicing. So after sleeping, probably practicing and making music for a musician is the more time-consuming activity of his life. So let's try to make this activity happy, enjoyable. We should always enjoy, as I said, our practicing. And to enjoy something, we have to understand why we do that. We have to enjoy the sense of doing something. So never practice without enjoyment, never practice without knowing the reason for which we do that and the goal which we want to achieve, as I said. And again, why do we practice so much? Why do we dedicate our life to music? There are many answers possible, but I don't think that we do for money. If we want to be rich as a professional, we would maybe choose other jobs. If we are lucky, we can be also rich by playing the piano. But I don't think that this should be the real goal. That could be a side effect, especially if we look for other higher goals. In my opinion, in my case, I decided that I like to play the piano because I can make music through the piano better than in other ways. And for me, making music is not just understanding the score, knowing the history of the composer, knowing the style, reading books to understand better how should I play that piece, and so on. Of course, this is part of the job, but the final goal is to understand who I am. Through Beethoven, through Chopin, through Mozart, through Mendelssohn, I'm able to find my own identity. This is the magic of music. And through music, I can be able to experiment and feel moods, emotions state of mind which I never experience in the real normal life. I can get in love every time, even if I'm not in love at that moment. I can suffer even if I'm not suffering, luckily, in my real life. I can also experience very deep and dark emotions, which is better not to experience in the real life. So today we speak a lot about uh, the metaverse, the virtual reality. We have a lot of technology to enjoy, augmented reality experiences. But music is much better than that for the same goal. Music is a way to experience other lives different than our real one, other sentiments which you are not experiencing in the real life, and to live different contemporary lives in the same moment. And when you practice, we should also think about that. How lucky we are. Much better than going to see a movie because we can write and shot our own movies through the music. That's why the narrative, the drama of each piece should be very important for our experience, for our research. I always try to tell a story when I play a piece, and the practicing sessions are also the discovering moment where I discover more details of the story, and I look forward to find the best way to share this story with my audience. So, the one final thought about career. When I ask my students, what's your final goal? Why you're here spending so many years in conservatory to play the piano? They say, because I want to be a professional pianist, I want to win the competition, I want to be famous, I want to make my CD and so on. And I tell them, okay, that's all fine, but are you sure this is your really deeper reason for which you want to do that? Because you are not going to be happy if you are only famous. I think music can make you happy if only you do it for, as I said before, understanding who you are, experiencing your inner life, things that you are not yet experiencing in your real life. And mm, the practicing moment is the best moment where this magic can happen. Thank you so much. Bye bye.